Got this Chevy
Malibu.
I think it's a 2006 crank no start. It's my neighbor's car. She got stranded the other day. She said the battery needs a jump start. So I drove out to her because she was just a few minutes away from me. And when I get there, I find out the car cranks, but it won't start. So at that point, all I brought with me was a jump starter and a multimeter or something. And I was not prepared for this because it was not a battery situation. So I told her there isn't much I can do here. She cranked the car over and it kind of sputtered a little bit. I told her, so what happened? You drove over here, drove fine, and all of a sudden it wouldn't start? She said no, she was driving and the car started to stumble and sputter, and then it finally shut off. And the way she was cranking, the way it sounded to me, it sounded like it wasn't getting fuel. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to this. You know what? I just heard the fuel pump prime. Maybe it's not a fuel issue. Battery's getting weak. So I put up the codes and look what's the first thing I see. We have crankshaft codes. Okay, so the car is now running. All I did was put my jump starter on it, but it is not happy. It sounds like crap and it is just stumbling. Now I'm gonna take this opportunity to move this car because it is at least halfway down the block from where my garage is at. And you can see with the cold and the snow, it is not convenient to work on this car. Alright, so the first thing I noticed is this thing does not sound happy. It sounds even worse when you're outside by the engine. This does not sound right to me. Anyway, I wanted to check to see if we are charging, and it looks like we are. Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and move the car right now. I got the car back in the garage. As you can see, it still runs like crap. Here I got some data PIDs open for the camshaft, and you can see our desired, okay, alright. Both of our desireds are at 0.50, and then the actual angle 0.50. So it's not commanding any of them. That's why it says 0%, because where it wants to be, that's where they're at. I'd expect them to move a little bit once you get on the accelerator pedal, and once I push on the pedal you could hear this, but look at the numbers. Nothing is moving. So I did go ahead and check the oil on the engine. There is oil in it. Since I don't see the cam angle changing as I hit the accelerator pedal, I mean not even a single blip out of it. I'm going to come straight for the two solenoids that sit on top of the engine right here. They're super common to go bad. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull them out and have a look at them. I got the two solenoids out, and this is exactly how they came out. Let's look at the exhaust side first. Look at all that crap inside of there. Exactly how it came out the car. And then here goes the intake side. Look at that. I'm not surprised that on the scanner what we were seeing, that nothing was moving. Look how these things are being starved of oil and they can't do what they're supposed to do. This doesn't look like an engine that gets its oil changes on time. Alright, so I got them cleaned up using my trusty toothbrush right here and some brake parts cleaner. Now this stuff was caked on here really good. I mean, for some parts I even just had to grab my little screwdriver here and just go picking at the carbon. That's how bad it was caked on. But one thing I noticed is, let's take a listen to the intake side. Now let's listen to the exhaust side. Let's try to bench test them. We'll put power to them and see if we can get them to move. Alright, so they both seem to be clicking whenever I give them power. But the intake side, the one that was rattling, does seem to be a little bit louder, which makes sense. The piece is rattling, so of course when it actuates, it's going to sound a little bit louder. Listen. Put out the multimeter just to check the resistance in each solenoid. So on the exhaust side, we have 13.3 ohms. Intake side, we got 12.0, 12.1, something like that. I have the car running right now. You can probably hear that it still sounds like crap. And the solenoids still say the same exact thing. If I push the accelerator pedal, still nothing moves. Since the oil filter is super easy to get to on this car, I'm gonna go ahead and just pull it out. The oil filter out. Let's look inside of here. You can see how nasty that oil looks, okay? And if you come over to the filter, let's try to separate some of these pleats. Look at this, guys. Trying to get this to focus. So I could scoop some of it out. That is what's inside of this filter. This is what's inside of this engine. I'm not shocked at all that this thing is running so shitty. You could see how this thing could be starved of oil. Filters like this, you know, it's throughout the whole engine. I just found out that the fuse pump relay and fuse is located back here in the trunk. I did not know that. But I'm not convinced that there isn't a fuel delivery issue, because the night I went out to go look at this car, I mean, this thing was cranking very healthy. There's no reason why this thing should have not started. And it is possible, because I've seen it before, that a bad pump that won't start on the spot, but once it gets towed into wherever it's going, you get it off of the tow truck, all of a sudden the car starts. Well, because that fuel pump has been bumped around a few times in the ride of the tow truck. So I got my current clamp, everything connected. I'm just gonna go ahead and hit the switch for the fuel pump. Fuel pump is not running, and I don't see any major dropouts. I mean, you could see there's like one hump that's like lower than the other ones, but it's nothing major, and I don't see like a dead spot on a commutator. So yeah, I think the pump is fine. Alright, so now that we had a look at this, I could kind of just put that to rest and not worry about the fuel pump for now. Here I have the new filter installed and a new O-ring. I'm about to go ahead and pop this in. Now the owner said that this car just had an oil change about a month ago, so I went ahead and checked the sticker inside the car, and of course it doesn't say when oil change was done, it just says when it needs its next oil change, okay? But what we have here is not something that just happened from one oil change to the next. This is neglect over a long period of time to cause oil like this to just gunk up and to start clogging things, okay? So even before she owned this car, the previous owner, you could just tell they weren't good with oil changes. I have a neighbor that has a 15 Malibu, and I know it's a different engine, but it's still a 4-cylinder and it still has these solenoids on them. So I asked him if I could get in his car and pull some data, and he was kind enough to let me do so. So I pulled up the same data pads on his car, and here's a screenshot of it. Now here's something that was so like tunnel vision, that yeah, these solenoids are bad, that I just kept persisting, you know. But here's something I noticed is, okay, here goes desired exhaust and desired intake. Well, if we look at the actual exhaust and the actual intake, everything is matching. So the car wants 14 degree on the intake side, and the solenoid is giving it 14 degree. The car wants 6 degree on the exhaust side, and the solenoid is giving it the 6 degree that it wants. Well, on this car, the desired is at 0, so the solenoids aren't moving it past the 0.5 because the car isn't commanding it to. The desired on this car is 0. The car doesn't want to advance any of these cam positions, okay? So I think that's where I got this like tunnel vision, where like, yeah, these things gotta be bad, and I just kind of went down that path. But you know, seeing this just kind of made me like, duh, what the heck was I thinking, you know? So the car is commanding for something, and the car is responding to it, and it's doing what, you know, the ECM is asking. On this Malibu that we're in right now, the one that we're working on, the cams are pretty much stuck at 0 because that's what the ECM is asking for. It doesn't want to move those things. What I want to do now is, let's see if we could put the scope on the crank sensor of this car, and let's just see if we could see something. Maybe something doesn't look right. Who knows? Alright, so you guys just saw the crank waveform, and it looked good. I didn't see anything crazy. So at this point, okay, the crank looks fine. The solenoids, they seem to be working, but what's happening is the ECM is not commanding them on, and it's because of the codes that the engine is throwing, okay? So because of that, the ECM is just leaving them at like 0 degree, doesn't want to turn them on. The way this thing sounds, this engine sounds pretty bad. I'm sure you guys heard it throughout this whole video. I'm starting to come to the conclusion that this engine is out of timing. So at this point, it's time to do some research. Okay, I found 2 good videos from Erico at South Main Auto and Keith from New Level Auto. They had same car, same codes, the P0016 and 17. And guess what it turned out to be in their videos? That's right, timing related. Okay, the engine was out of timing. So that's good to hear or see, because it's kind of confirming my suspicion after all this time I got invested in this car. Pull the valve cover off of this thing, and look at the mess in here. This thing is just a nightmare. How bad that is. Now, initially, okay, I took the valve cover off and I go to see if there's slack in the chain. I'm like, ah, it's pretty tight, right? But if we go inside the car and just kind of blip the starter to get the, to get everything rotating. Let's see. Oh, that even sounds bad. You could hear the chain slapping. It's more noticeable now that the timing cover's off. It's not as loose right now, but there is some play, which shouldn't even be like that. I bumped the key a few more times and look how bad this thing is. Yeah, so I guess it just picks and chooses whenever it wants to have tension up here. So with this much slack in the chain, you can see how it's easy for this thing to skip a tooth or two and jump timing. If that's not the case, this slack in the chain just adds up to just a lot of degree in the timing system that the ECM doesn't like to see, and that's why it flags these type of codes. So it's now the next day and I had a chance to talk to the owner. What I recommended is, honestly, I don't think this engine is worth putting any money into, okay? Because even if you put a new timing chain on it and you change out the phasers, the engine is just in such poor condition. We don't know what other oil restrictions it has and how soon it's going to cause this problem to happen again, because the timing tensioner or anything in timing related is being starved of oil. So anyways, I recommended that they get a replacement engine, have a shop put it in, call it a day, right? But obviously it costs more, because I gave her a quote to actually change the timing components, and that costs less than putting an engine in the car. Okay, so you know how it is. People always want the cheapest option, but I made sure to tell them, hey, if I do this, it fixes the car, there's like no guarantee on anything, because I warned you, I do not recommend repairing this engine. It's just best to get a different one that's nice and clean. So the fact that I think they're going to want me to put a timing set on this engine, what I want to do is a relative compression check. I don't think there's any damage to the engine as far as it being able to have its combustion cycle, but I'm just gonna go ahead and check this real fast. Doing a voiceover so I could be a little more clear here. Basically, I'm gonna do a relative compression test, and if that looks good on the scope, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out one of the spark plugs and do a traditional compression test. If the numbers look good on the gauge, then I'm just gonna assume all of the other cylinders are good because of what we see on the scope. So I hope that makes sense. Alright, so I did this test 2 times with AC coupling, so I'm doing it at the battery, and so far it's decent across the board, not too bad. And then on cylinder 1, I did a manual check, and we are at about, what is that, 180, 190, I don't know, maybe like 195, I think, I don't know. Alright, so the fact that that's up there, it's got that much PSI, and the relative test is showing that they're more or less, they're not bad across the board. So I'm going to call it good. I don't think there's any internal engine damage. The timing is not that far off to cause the pistons to come in contact with the valves. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and start putting everything back together to get this car out the garage and just wait on them and see what's going to happen, because they haven't really told me what's really going to happen with this car. Okay, so as you can see, I got everything put back together. The car's running, still sounds like crap. still have not heard back from the owner on what's gonna happen. Honestly, I guarantee you I'm gonna see them driving this car every day. As long as it starts and it goes, they don't care how crappy it runs, as long as it runs. I think that's it. If something happens, if I end up replacing the timing components on this engine, I'll bring you guys along and just record a little bit here and there. But for the most part, that's it. And I appreciate you guys watching and sticking along. I know this was a long video, and it kind of sucks to spend so much time for at the end of the day to just be like, your timing's out. Wasted so much time looking at other crap. But I mean, I guess it's better than spending 3 hours looking at a car only to find out it's missing a fuse.